Good afternoon. This is Monday Live. I am Anto Budiarjo. This is a show we do every week to help us get through the pandemic and figure out what's on the other side for commercial buildings. All our profiles are on Monday Live. Views expressed are personal, not of any organization or company. And please do post questions and comments if possible, complete the survey at the end of the show. And this slide deck is available on mondaylive.org also, with some links that some of us have provided. So our agenda today, we're going to do our normal 10-15 minutes of chit chat of news. And then Mark Peacock asked a question of all of us in our sort of other meeting that we do, our private meeting we did last week. 7 months in, how are we all doing? So we're all going to take turns to kind of chat about that, how we're doing, both business and personal wise. So that should be quite interesting conversation. Some slides. This is a slide that Ken Sinclair put up, navigating never, never. I'm not quite sure what that means. I'm sure Ken will explain in a minute. John is talking about sustainability as being quite an important subject, talking also about airports being a problem area. Jim is talking about NYC starting grading larger buildings on energy efficiency. I'm not sure what that's about, so we can dig in with that. I observed two things. I watched the David Attenborough new documentary. I think we've all watched his documentaries in the past. This one's a little bit different. And towards the end, he's kind of talking about how sustainability needs to be not implemented, how we need to think about it. And he's sort of part of the things that he's talking about is also buildings a little bit. Also saw this from CDC now admitting that it can spread through airborne transmission. So there you go, especially in poorly ventilated spaces. So that's all the slides that we have for today. I'm going to throw it back to who wants to start? Who wants to? Ken, you want to talk about Never Never?
I'm not sure that's a good opening, but what I kind of think has happened to us all is we've all ended up doing the things that we never said we would do as we move remotely, and everything is changing. So I just thought I would twist on that we're entering into, we basically have to figure out how to work our way through the Never Never land that we're now in. There's a lot of changes, I think, where we've been kind of internalized and looked at our industry and what we're doing, and we don't really pay much attention to what's happening around us. I think we have to basically change that focus, and we have to see how the world is reacting to the remoteness. And so it's kind of a little different of a twist, I think. Again, goes back and plays on the transformation torches, the idea that there's all these things and we're getting these opportunities thrown at us. The opportunities are not opportunities that normally were handled within our industry. They're bigger than our industry. So we're having to change. So the things I'm never going to do that. You're going to do that. And once you do that, once you transform into Neverland, you're never coming back. That's the message.
Interesting. Lots.
Hey, Ken, I'm reminded of 100 years ago when Greyhound buses was one of the top 10 brands in America. Just a top brand. It was a great brand. And how 100 years later it's a nothing brand, just like Sears or other brands. And I'm wondering, as you talk about Never Never Land, since we've all figured out how to do this remotely, are the airlines heading in the same direction as Greyhound buses, where there'll be a much smaller bit, we'll be traveling less, and the travel will be non-essential travel, so to speak, more for holidays and so forth. So I'm thinking about, oh, I would never travel again. And maybe that's a natural outcome of this. And it's happened in the past with us. Things that we thought were essential, maybe no longer are.
Yeah, actually, my comments to what has happened in the last bunch of months, when I started thinking about that, what would I say when you threw that question to me? And the biggest thing for me is that I go to these functions, these Realcoms and AHRs, and that's sort of a big part of my life, and the education sessions therein. So that has radically changed, and education has gone. So yeah, just that plays on the travel, and you know, we would never do this online. Yeah, we are doing it online. Got involved in a few international things. The reach has got further and more focused. So interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, John, you point out the airport issue.
Yeah, well, first let me comment on my slide, because I started that slide. I had a positive story at the top, right? If you notice that, about energy and sustainability and major property managers saying they're still bought in. And I thought, great, I'm gonna have a positive slide so Bill won't give me any crap this week. But then as soon as I finished reading that, the next story was the Changi Airport shutting down terminals, being in the worst condition they've ever seen, billions of dollars of brand new terminals invested, and they're just closing them down. And then, of course, we all know, like over the weekend, unless something major happens, United and American are going to lay off 40,000 or more people or whatever. And I guess I'd put this is this schizophrenic, pull, do you get up in a with a positive attitude or negative? Because how do you interpret such wildly conflicting news that both affect our business, right? Are we going to go to shows? Doesn't look like it at the moment. Is business increasing for energy? Well, it might be. It's very unusual to see this pulled in both directions simultaneously. Usually there is some congealing that helps you say, okay, we're going in this direction. So anyways.
Yeah, just to echo John's point, pluses or minuses, it's weird, right? So an example of the airport, Changi Airport in Singapore built a brand new Terminal 4 that opened in April of last year. And now, I'm dealing with the Changi Airport group out there, and they just shut down and relocated all the airlines to the previous brand new terminal sitting right there, everything turned off. Yet on the same token, this week, or was it last week or this week? Last week, I went to the CRE Tech conference that was held on one of these hop-in events. An event I probably would not have gone to in the past because, it's sort of on the fringe, but really interesting and compelling, and had great sessions. And, I chatted with people that I probably hadn't chatted before with, and was actually quite compelling. I would actually do that session again, right? And I could let it run in the background and do some work. And then when I saw something interesting, I'd turn back to it. It was, like you say, there's two sides of that whole equation. And I could see myself doing a lot more of those type of events.
Did you do it virtually or in person?
Virtually, it was all done virtually. There was this, they use this hop-in conference technology, which is really cool stuff. You can see the tech is changing rapidly to get to that. And people are still working it out.
The name again of the technology they use?
It's called the Hop-in, HOP.in. It's a conferencing technology. It's brand new, apparently.
Hopin.2. Hopin.t.
Yes, .to, sorry.
So do you guys think with that type of technology, obviously it's a growing marketplace, do you think we'll get to a point where there will be one winner? Like, go back to the days on videotape, what was it, Betamax or VHS versus, will there be one basically preferred provider for this type of technology?
Well, that's actually an interesting point, Mark, because I was going to mention just earlier, I read another article about, there's a lot of people who've made a lot of moves quick in the space. Zoom is obviously one of them, right? And their market numbers increased fourfold in the last X months. Someone on the other end of the spectrum is Slack, right? Slack has done nothing to address, opportunity within this particular space. And, they were born from frustration by software guys trying to communicate, and yet they've made no innovation in the space to move forward, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, I think Microsoft Teams, they've gone from a bit of an also ran, Skype, to something that's reasonably compelling now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So Mark, if I can answer that, because I spent quite a number of years trying to figure out the conference technology thing with PointView, the product. It's very messy. And one of the reasons why it's very messy is the requirements and the needs and the motivations of different types of events and conferences are just so different. So it was very, very difficult to try and aggregate those things. So I suspect the answer to your question is no. I think there'll be some platforms that will be really, really good for certain things, but there'll be lots of different platforms that's suitable for different formats, as Anno said, Zoom and Hopin and a whole bunch of other things. So there is no need to have one winner, and there probably won't be.
Well, would your answer be the same? That's the B2B space. How about the consumer space? Because I think, and I look at it, Zoom seems like right now it is the choice of choices for family times and so forth and so on. I don't think people know Teams as much as far as in the consumer space, or Hopin, et cetera. So,
but Facebook and WhatsApp and those kind of consumer apps are kind of dealing with that side of the market. They made it easy, and a lot of them are free and things that they're already using.
Which is a sad part of the equation of the 7 months in. I'd have to tell you that I've had more discussions with my family over the last few months, and there's my family scattered to the winds, right? Than I've had, ever before.
And that's sad.
No, it's good. It's sad that I wasn't doing it before.
We've heard the sad part, Anto.
yeah, but at least you've got technology that almost puts you together versus in your days, you had the tin cans tied with the string.
String to a string?
Yeah. Hello.
No, he was doing smoke signals.
Yeah. There you go.
So why don't we move on to our main theme? And Mark, you asked the question first, why don't last week? Why don't you kick this off and ask it of all of us?
All right. So here we are, 7 months into, I think we can all agree, the largest change agent, or if not one of the largest change agent to hit the building space in the last 25 years. I view it as this is probably the biggest change agent that we will see, this group here. So it's definitely disrupted the economy, accelerated shifts in how we do things, how we create changes that, to Ken's point, will persist for years, and maybe we won't go back. So at the end of the day is within the 7 months into this disruption, I started to think, what are some of the observations that I've seen? What are some of the things that have made an impact to me? And so I figured, let's get the group. I mean, we're a good group here. So I'll go ahead and start out. So, and again, these are not in particular order. So some of them are statements, and I won't elaborate on them because I want to make sure all of us have enough time for open discussion. So trust is now a new building asset. That, I think that for me has been very impactful and new for me. Second, COVID has forced our control systems to be a lot more functional than we ever imagined or we ever initially designed them for. Third is offices. And I look at this as, so long open offices, hello dynamic workplaces. Again, major change, major impact, and as I see it. 4 is jobs. And where I've looked at this and where I think this has had the most impact for me is that the mix of jobs that are emerging and will emerge from the pandemic will be completely different than those that were lost. And that to me is almost a wake-up call. I heard somebody say that, and that's kind of where I'm getting that particular thing. A sobering thought, which is this, and we talked about this, we go back early on in our discussions, and this is from our buddy, Mr. Allen at Harvard. And again, this is the sobering thought. The person who manages your building has a bigger impact on your health than your doctor. Think about that. The person managing our buildings has a huge impact on all of everybody's health. And then two other things, and this is more on the personal side, and I know I shared this with the group before, a special recognition and thanks. My hat's off and thumbs up to the NFL, NBC, CBS, Fox, and ESPN for not only their outstanding coverage and their incredible camera angles now that we see for us football fanatics, but to integrate and make those sound effects interoperable, making the stadium seem full with real live fans and creating that experience in football that we all grew up, except though maybe not you, Ken Sinclair, maybe not the Canadian Football League, but at least here in the US. And so I leave it with this, and then let's have our discussion. I'm curious what everybody else thinks. We are beyond seeking to build our way out of this. We are now building ourselves out. So those are just kind of some of the things that kind of affect how I looked at this. So how about we go to Anno? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the thing that jumps out to me, and this has kind of been my mantra for many, many years, is, you know, one of the big things I love about this country is the innovation cycle, right? I mean, this US just generates ideas and innovations like you would not believe. And, you know, and I've obviously lived and worked around the world and know the whole space. When thrown challenges like we've been thrown with COVID, the way that we react and the way that, you know, the US reacts is, you know, there's griping, there's complaints and all that stuff in the background. But by and large, it's the innovation. I got to agree with you, Mark. What the sports, NFL, baseball, you know, what they've done. I think the one that's let down a little bit actually was the hockey, but we'll come back to them.
Oh, I thought you were going to say cricket. Sorry. Anyway,
go ahead. No, they've done a worse job. That's even a more terrible job. And I am personally disappointed by that. And just to make it even worse, the Aussie Rules football, which is currently in just finishing up, that was even a worse experience. So but look what they did, right? From an innovative perspective, the crowd noises, the virtual presences that they did, the fake people with the cutouts and the angles, the camera angles. But even that audio feedback stuff has become, in the space of weeks, right? It started off as a test trial, and now it's almost indistinguishable about, you know, whether people are there or not. But the whole point about that is just, like I said, I think and then Zoom and Hopkins, the step up here in the US from an innovation perspective is something that always has me in awe, right? Of how we respond to this thing. And I got to tell you, and again, I've been everywhere. I don't see anyone else stepping up from an innovative perspective of bringing solutions, answers, ideas, different ways. You know, I do a lot of work in the APAC market, and they're, you know, same old, you know, here's the process, and it works for them and that sort of stuff. But, you know, the stuff that we're doing right now will end up there in a pretty short order. And that's, you know, I think it's just testament to the people and the culture and stuff of what we have here in the US.
Cool. All right, let's go around the horn so we can make
Can
sure
I go
everybody-
next?
Yes, absolutely. That's where I was going.
Yeah, because it kind of taps into what Anno just said, because my sort of focus is the cycle of innovation. It's kind of the same thing as what Anno's talking about, but looking at it from our perspective, right? And the cycle of innovation and the cycle of conversations, such as this group, right? We meet weekly, right? Most of us are here most weeks. We also have a private call that we have on Wednesdays. If I had reached out to all of you in the year 2019 and suggested that we would meet twice a week on Zoom to chat about stuff, nobody would have answered my email, right? But now this has become norm, and this is not the only group. You know, there's what James Dice is doing. Some of you are involved in that. There's a lot of stuff that I'm doing with digital twins, and there's a lot of stuff in BACnet, and there's lots of sort of discussions, and all of those discussions are sort of enabling innovation, and the cycle of it is just so fast now. That's sort of amazing to watch, just to see how we're actually getting through. And I actually agree with your last point, Mark, that one of the things about 7 months is that we've kind of gotten used to it, and now we're kind of in the phase of being productive in this new world. And I think that's really very, very interesting, because we'll start to try and do new things. And if there's one thing that worries me, is that it's kind of like the amount of innovation is kind of exponential, and exponential curves is always worrying, because at some point it goes to infinity. That doesn't work. So just sort of wondering how that's sort of going to pan out, and how this is actually going to produce stuff. Cool. That's my thoughts.
All right, how about, again, nobody knows who I'm going to call on next, so this is fun. How about Jim Butler?
Very good. Thanks, Mark. So I'm going to talk a little bit about HVAC systems. You know, COVID has reminded us that HVAC systems actually still matter in buildings, and they're not just about saving energy. So when we started this COVID adventure, we were mostly concerned about physical contact and how that might spread the disease. But as the scientists have learned more about the disease, we realized that aerosols probably are important too. And HVAC systems have a potential role in cleaning up the air and making the aerosol problem less of a problem for us. So I see a role long-term for HVAC systems, not just in helping us to get back into buildings more safely, but you know, HVAC systems will, if properly designed and maintained, help keep us in buildings when the next airborne virus comes along. So I'm glad that we still matter in that sense. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is energy. And although energy is not the priority for people at this point, it's not forgotten either. And I'd like to bring up a couple of things in the news that I think are relevant. First of all, the state of California, just a few days ago, passed a bill allocating some utility energy efficiency money to repairing HVAC systems in schools to make them more efficient and make the ventilation work better. Essentially, this is just a reallocation of some funds that hadn't been spent. But California's view is, you know, students are going to go back into schools eventually. And wouldn't it be great for us to take this little opportunity that we have right now, in which students aren't in schools, or not very often, and fix some of these systems, make them work better, make them more efficient. So that was encouraging news on the energy front. And my slide that Anto showed at the beginning of this is about New York City. And New York City has ambitious goals related to greenhouse gas emissions. And the next step of their program to try to clean up buildings is to actually give buildings a grade based on their energy consumption. Now, they're using Energy Star for this, and not everyone's happy about it. but it is the next step of the progression from, okay, let's measure how much energy we're using to, oh, what can we do about it? And how can we communicate about the energy efficiency of buildings to potential tenants and future owners and other stakeholders. So energy is perhaps taking a break in most respects, but it still matters, and it will certainly matter more once we get through COVID.
So Jim, to what you just said about New York, is that also tied into the, what is it, that local law 97, where if these buildings don't meet certain guidelines or specifications, the owners and operators can be fined fairly significantly?
Yes, it's part of the progression of that law. The first step of that law was for people to actually measure their energy consumption and report it. The second step was grading buildings A, B, C, D, based on the Energy Star rating method. And then starting in, I think it's 2024, building owners will actually have to make improvements to their buildings in order to hit a minimum threshold for energy efficiency. And obviously there's a lot of discussion about the fairness of the methods that they're going to be using, but New York City is actually pressing on existing buildings to make them better.
Gotcha. All right, let's go to Mr. John Petsy. What's kind of been your 7-month look into all of this?
Yeah, so yeah, I thought about, how to talk about this. And the first thing I'd say, the point Anto made, we've been through enough time to have to come to some type of acceptance. So the words I'd use are the, improvise, adapt, overcome. And we're seeing that. But I think part of it is just the whole psychological thing. This isn't a short-term issue. We've been doing it long enough. We've had to get up and, do whatever we could for our businesses, which is changed. And also tied into some things we were talking about before the call, which was we're seeing a significant increase in activity, right, in conversations with people. And I would say energy is still a major component of that. But I would, if I had to kind of characterize it with a bubble chart, which topics are getting the most: commissioning, retro commissioning, monitoring-based commissioning. A lot of conversations about that. Obviously, it isn't just about running efficiently. It's they need to know that they're getting their air exchanges and their equipment is running, and because they're potentially legally liable or just want to make sure their buildings are comfortable and safe. So those waves of activity are they lead actual projects, activity, and sales by some amount of time. That's unknown, but there's I'm finding that, people are, if you will, back to work. One of the things I think we talked about this summer was, the quietness or the difference of activity in the early summer. There was really potentially two sides of that. One was, what COVID was doing to all the businesses, the unknown it was creating, but then there's always that summer mode, right? We get in a summer mode, right? We've even had someone on the call here join from the boat to make us all feel bad. All right. And, I wondered a number of times, is part of this that a lot of people who were fortunate enough to be able to said, what, I'm going to take 3 weeks this year. I've never been able to because things have been so damn busy. I can afford to, lucky people. But more people actually, oddly enough, took some extended vacation. And all of a sudden now, into September, it's like everybody's back to work. A little bit of an overstatement, but I definitely see that. So I would say the main theme is people are accepting, okay, we're stuck. What are we going to do, right? We're regularly on 5 different webcast platforms every week, right? So you got to learn them all. You got to deal with them all. To answer that earlier question, Mark, I don't think they're going to consolidate. The needs are so different when you're running an event versus this type of a meeting. What you would do to make one work well would actually be in conflict with some of your other needs. So those are my thoughts. People are adapting and overcoming, where they can. There's certain businesses, obviously, that can't and are still seriously affected, but others are. So.
I find it interesting that both you brought up energy and Jim Butler brought up energy as well. And initially, in the first 2-3 months of this thing, if we had discussions on whether or not energy was going to be a continued part of the conversation, or was it going to be at that top of the list, so to speak, during this conversation. And, we didn't know. We had PKD on to talk about energy, so forth and so on. And I have to admit, I thought that energy was going to move down the list, maybe 2 or 3 points, but I don't think it is. So that's interesting that you both talked about energy and that type of thing. How about, let's go to Alper. Let's see what you have to say there, friend.
So,
7 months in.
7 months in. So we definitely went through the cycle of acceptance, and we can see.
Can you speak up a bit or come closer to the mic?
Volume up. Yeah.
The volume up. Okay, there you go. It should be much better now.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So I think we are going through the cycle of acceptance. I mean, there are people in denial mode, anger and depression, and rightly so. And but one of the things that has happened is that we had more time on. We became more productive overall because everyone was staying at home. They didn't have to go to birthday parties. Also on the customer side, they are worried and they're thinking about how they can calculate things like indoor quality, how they can measure and how they can measure occupancy. And I do see the customers pushing me, like Trevor that is on the line right now, on coming up with cool ways of finding those numbers. That is very helpful for by the time that we get out of this event. I think that we are much more productive, but the sales are not going to match up until this virus goes away. So we're getting ready after this thing goes away, hopefully, and hopefully that we will be alive until the end of it. And the third thing that I'll say is that I think that before the virus, where we were controlling the buildings has been occupancy and energy, tenant comfort and energy. It was the equilibrium of that. Now the third dimension is going to be safety. So controlling the buildings in equilibrium at a given time will be much more difficult, depending on virus events if this thing goes longer. So we are adding a third dimension to our equilibrium.
So do you think, for what you just said, for what you just commented on, do you think this is going to be part of the conversation now each and every day going forward? Let's say as we get over this and we start to put this in the distant memory, so to speak, is this still going to be part of the conversations between building owners and technology providers?
Yeah, I think it will be just like how we deal with security, right? What happens when a security event happens? How do you get out of the building, right? So there are things that are being discussed within building space. This will be just like that. What happens if a virus like this ever comes again? What is your method of control? Is it coded into the BMS system? Are you monitoring indoor quality? I think this will be a part of it, and there will be most likely a standardization. I do believe in that. We will act on it eventually, but we're just figuring it out now. But I'm sure there will be consortiums, just like how we deal with IT security or physical security of the built space.
Okay, good, thanks. All right, Bill. You're putting your arms up like that. Was that a signal that you wanted to go next there?
Yes.
All right.
So here's what I've seen in 7 months. I've seen something, I've seen this like group neuroses for building automation. This group neuroses of a lack of relevance. I've seen that melt off of all of us. And relevance, an increased relevance. That's interesting to me. I've also seen, without hesitation, all along the value chain, people understanding the need to take a look at how they interact with customers and how they make money. So a little bit of a shakeup or movement along the value chain. I also have to say, all this uncertainty, this change, that's got to equal opportunity for all of us. Regardless of the customer situation and all that, and everyone along the value chain is going to deal with what they deal with, but the folks on this call and the technology professionals have to see opportunity here. I also, number 4 for me was, a couple of years ago, I flew my mother, who's elderly and has dementia. We flew from Philly down to Atlanta. She had no idea that she even got inside of a silver tube, flew, landed, and ended up in Atlanta. Like in her mind, she had no idea. So this deeper dive into this virtual simulation, moving away from the analog, the airplane, the car, seems to me like a natural progression. And if we really think about what's happening, we're going deeper and deeper into our simulation or dreamscape, however you want to put it. And it just seems natural to me. And then the last thing I like to say is I did fly this week. And I like the fact that for years, airlines have known that loading planes from the back to the front is the appropriate way to do it, to lessen interaction and disease transmission. And finally, Delta Airlines started doing that. And I hope that stays, frankly. So those are the things that I see changing.
So let me ask this. You brought up the customer, the value chain, and things like that. Do you think this whole experience, COVID experience, the fact that we, as all humans, we're not traveling, to your point, and we used to, for sales call, to go personal, interact with customers, prospects, and things like that. Do you think this has hurt the sales process, the lack of being able to travel?
I don't.
Not go see somebody face to face?
No, I don't. Think about the buildup on both sides to have to prepare to have a face-to-face meeting, whether it's travel or getting out of your desk or being uncomfortable. What's this person going to think of me? And all that human stuff that now just goes away. We hop online, maybe you turn your camera on, maybe you don't, and we get down to business.
So basically, all the bullshit's gone and it's just direct.
Gone.
All right, let's go ahead and move on. Mr. Fay, how about you? What's your observations and what's been impactful for you during these the 7 months here?
Yeah, so pretty much unlike the rest of you, I've been involved in a startup and coming into the market pretty much at the very time when COVID hit. So having to, a startup by itself is, I would say, arguably difficult in any time. And during this time, it's unquestionably been affected in a negative way, in the following negative way, which is the people we want to sell to are highly distracted. So they're either in a survival mode in many cases, but I would say arguably they're largely in a survival mode, trying to figure out what to do with their time and their employees. So the trying to grab their attention has been unquestionably affected by COVID. Now, to that, there's been a positive that a number of you guys have already alluded to, which is the technology and the opportunity to communicate what we're doing in a much, much more effective and efficient manner. Zoom is now, Zoom, Teams, whatever technology you want to use, has become acceptable. So when we not only identify opportunities, we're able then to very quickly pivot to go after that opportunity in a very efficient manner, because I don't have to get on a plane. I don't have to schedule some meeting and grab half a day of a potential opportunity's time face to face. So instead, in fact, I can put a very pretty complex onboarding program in place, schedule it all with multiple parties, We've done scores of webinars over the past 2 months to lots and lots of potential customers in a very efficient way. So on the one hand, it's been challenging getting people's attention because they're concerned about their own business. On the other hand, if they do have an hour to give, I can get that time and make really good use of it. So that's my main observation. I know, Jim, you talked about the HVAC side. As I brought up months ago about the advancement in technology around air, cleaning air through whether it's ultraviolet or bipolar ionization, and I've installed that in my house. I've talked to a lot of other people who have either installed it in their buildings or in their homes. So that desire to clean the air through one or more different technologies it's happening, and that's good. That's really good. So those are my points.
So do you think that on that last point you just made, do you think that part of what's helping to drive that is, and I think Anto mentioned it early on in a conversation, or somebody, about the CDC finally recognizing that airborne transmission is a factor in all of this?
Yeah, for sure, because we were all concerned what to do. And what it caused me to do is ask the question and talk to people, is there something out there that could actually clean the air? And once you ask the question, you find out, yeah, in fact, there's a whole score of companies that have jumped into the fray here to say, I've got a way to do it. I mean, there's at least 4 or 5 bipolar ionization firms that I'm aware of now. I had no idea the technology was out there, let alone that there's 5 different companies that are selling it. So I think it's to Anna's point about around innovation. This country's been moving really fast this year in that regard.
All right, let's go to Jim Lee. You've been sitting there patiently.
Thank you, Mark. I've been trying to figure out, now that we're into this, tactically where people are spending money. And it's very difficult in our analytics business for me to measure that because we have a 10-year sales cycle. And John, don't laugh too hard. It's true.
Hey, after the call, will you tell me how you sped it up from what I'm seeing?
So it's very hard to tell what the effect of the virus is, because even 7 months in, because the cycle is so long. But I have been looking from another angle. I'm also a building owner now, and I have tenants, and I've been trying to upgrade the filter systems to more and more fine-grained MERV filters. And what I've discovered is that I can't buy any of the filters that are in the range of anything that will take out COVID. So that's hard evidence to me that people are actually spending money upgrading filters because they're not available in the market because they're all sold out. I'm trying to take that same data right now on ultraviolet lights. Once again, tremendous amount of rhetoric there. I'm not convinced people are spending as much on ultraviolet lights because you actually have to do a little something. Filters, you just buy them and slap the new ones in, take the old ones out. So to me, I'm trying to figure out tactically if people are actually doing something material. And the only data point I have that they're actually spending money is that filter data point so far.
So if you can't find them, is this a business that this group can get into, and all of a sudden we formed a new company and we are manufacturing, selling, and servicing those filters?
I think it's a mature industry that has channels and lots of manufacturing capacity, and I think other people will ramp up in time to meet the demand.
Gotcha. Thanks. All right, Mr. Sinclair.
I was pleased that everybody, there was a lot of uses of the word never. John used it, never taking 3 weeks off. I hadn't thought of that side of it. The the good side of it, I thought of just all the nevers that we had never done that we have actually started doing. And so back to my original theme, which is going to be the theme for our November issue, is the navigating never, never. So I'm kind of pleased that we've all kind of come to the realization that just because we've never done it, that's not a barrier, that's a door. That's a door we need to open and go see why we didn't do it. And then when we open the door, we see that everything has changed. Everything that we perceived that we never did that is changed. So we now have to, and we have this tremendous education process for us all. And we have to move into technologies. We would never support LoRa. We've made that, I'm never going into that. And all of a sudden, we may have to go take a look at that because it's starting to evolve. We will never support IT systems. We'll never make them part of our data because it's unreliable, it's not blah, 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 blah. We have to take a look at that because that's changing as well. So we will never use chatbots. We will never, there's just a million things we have never said we will do. And we now have to start looking into them, reanalyze them, and take a look at that. So how has it affected me, automated buildings? It's basically, as I mentioned earlier, normally my focus would be going to things like Realcomm, going to events like AHR, which has been delayed for 3 months, 2 months. I'm not sure that's going to be a solution. It'll probably fall more into being the event in Las Vegas. Anyway, so this is a radical change. Then what's happened out of that is people are actually more apt to start their own publication companies, which could be the end of automated buildings. But I saw it as an opportunity because the roots of automated buildings was the joining together of all the .coms that occurred in 1999. Basically, we had so many .coms, you couldn't find anything. And so I took on the task of trying to just stick these all on one page. Now I see my new task is to take all of these publications, which there's just a myriad of, with incredible information, and start providing linkage to them. And I definitely had a few times when I said that I will not support other publications and advertise them for free on my site, but never, never, never.
Never say never, right?
Never say never. The other one I just wanted to close on was, once you go to the thing you said you never would do, you probably will not go back, especially if it works. And there's so many things that have actually worked. Loading planes from the back, there's just a myriad of things that nobody ever questioned. And now that we've questioned them and said, we've never done that. And it's like, yeah, maybe we should have. And if we do it and it works, we're never going back.
Cool. Thanks.
Man, that is so cool. I love being in your space, man, because you're an old dude, older than me, that thinks like a young man. And that's powerful, man.
Well, at my point, I'm always trying to decide whether I've gone senile. And
We'll let you know.
It's a tough battle, I tell you.
We'll
I
let
have
you
no
know.
idea. All I know is when the screen goes blank and Ken has gone crossed the line.
It's all simulation anyway, Sinclair.
He's checked out. All right, Therese, I think you're going to be our last person here to give your thoughts and what's impacted you over the last 7 months or so and with this thing.
Well, I agree with everybody. I agree with Alper that it's just been incredibly busy for me. A lot of the distractions have gone away. Events and meeting people face to face, and just being able to sit down and process all this content that I've got to reorganize for my company. I'm in the middle of a web redesign project, which makes me, look back at every white paper. I think about all of you often. So I go through every white paper and every piece of collateral, and I wouldn't have this sort of time And it's not a lot of time. There's everything's changing around me at the same time. You try to find a solid center because this industry is moving forward. Things that I feel like I'm a newcomer compared to some of you, and yet now I say, oh wow, I started this in 2007, between 2007, 2010. I saw, things that are just so exciting. The industry is changing now that I'm going through every piece of literature and having this long view. Things like occupancy tracking, occupancy feedback apps, taking that data, merging it with other data. That's standard practice now. Whereas it was like, wow, what is this thing coming out of Berkeley that Lindsay is talking about? And now that's just standard practice. Occupancy apps, doing intelligence at the edge, my time at Enlighted and trying to describe intelligence at the edge. That's just, everybody gets that now. It really, though it does feel like a 10-year cycle, it does feel very slow. At the same time, there is so much that has happened, and I really do think this is an accelerant, this COVID period, for the technology really being accepted and deployed and paid for and understood, and getting ready for the next steps.
So does that, what you just ended with, does the group think that that's what's next for us as an industry? The acceptance of COVID and technology innovation to address it. And I kind of just wrote this out. And when it comes to technology, it has given us the means to change the way we work, live, and meet in such a fundamental way that we will never go back. To your point, Ken Sinclair, it has also changed the way we operate and manage commercial buildings.
I would think about it as we've kind of turned the corner, and we see a lot of good things, but we still need to organize. We still need to make it all work at scale. Right? And one of the things that I've been worried about the last few weeks is we've all been aware of inequality, and mainly that's from a money perspective. But I see now lots of people being incredibly busy, me included, and a lot of people that have nothing to do. Right? So there's an inequality of busyness, which kind of doesn't make sense. But I think that's something that we just need to keep in mind. How do we organize? How do we make this actually a really, really strong movement for change, positive change?
Do you think it's, just curious, again, the group, is it a collaborative effort with people like us who are the industry folks, as well as the building owners and operators, as well as technology providers? Is there one group that should be leading this, or there's really no leader? A lot of people just must come together to do what you just said, Anto.
I think there's roles for everybody to do a different kind of leadership, but would love to hear other people's thoughts on that. How do we organize?
I think it's totally appropriate, Anto, to understand and recognize and pay attention to the fact that in this time of massive disruption, people will be left behind, people will have different levels of opportunity, and it's appropriate to stay in tune with that. And this has been happening since the beginning of humankind. So.
I always go back to the start of the Industrial Revolution when there was a bunch of guys digging a ditch and a steam shovel showed up, and they thought it's got to be the end of the world for us, because we look at this thing, it takes out as much as 15 men and moves it really quickly. Yeah, they thought steam was going to change the world. It moved it along a bit, but it's eventually it all works out. You learn how to fix steam engines.
That's right.
So one of the areas that, one of the comments I made at the beginning of this was how jobs are going to change. And so here we are in this industry. We can't find enough people to get into this industry, to fill the jobs that are available now across the board. And how do we do that? I mean, how, again, people, you know, as I said, you know, people are not going to have their jobs to go back to. We got jobs. We have great opportunities. How do we put that all together and bring people into this industry? And
Read
we've been
my
talking about
article in this month's Automated Buildings.
Yeah, I guess, you know, Lindsay.
Part of my point. Mark.
Lindsay Baker, again, is being kind of visionary in what she's doing in terms of, you know, focusing on the green jobs of tomorrow, Rocky Mountain Institute.
Well, again, I'm not talking just green jobs. We have technicians that we need. We need
Right.
folks to go in the buildings. We've got lots and lots of opportunities in this industry. And
I know, and another inspiration, Matt Schwartz, like when he told his story to James Dice, probably one of the books that competing magazines or competing efforts Ken's talking about, that James Dice and the Nexus interviewed Matt Schwartz. It was so good. Matt Schwartz's dad was like a school supervisor of facilities. You know, that our industry is so unique that we have all these second and third generation people that get it and get that you know, that this is real work, it's honest work, it's interesting work, and we have to do our best to keep communicating about that, because people that get in here seem like they want to stay in for generations.
We need to make it more hip, and I think AR will help it. Augmented reality will help it.
Yep.
Eventually,
I agree with Albert.
waiting for that to happen.
We need to look more like the software industry, because that's who we're competing with. You have to allow the people to define their own jobs. They basically decide where they're going to work, how they're going to work, when they're going to work, all of those things. We have to do stuff we've never done before. We have to completely change our thinking. And that's who you're competing with. You're competing with Amazon. Amazon's going to pay them as much as you, maybe even more. And they're giving them that. They can work anywhere they want. And they get free movies and free shipping. You got to chop that one too.
Mark, you know, I think, did you mention early on about the professor, I guess, who said that the health of the building is more important than what your doctor can do? Okay.
Uh-huh.
So when I listen to what everybody has said here, I come away with two themes that are really important: health and sustainability. And building systems, building control systems have been a necessary evil at best. Somebody builds a building, who cares about the HVAC system and the controls that are in it? We fight to get budgets for that stuff because there's nothing people rally around that they see as value. I think people can rally around a healthy building and a sustainable building. That's what I'm hearing coming out. And to the degree that we can build that vision of what our industry is able to deliver, and that also makes it attractive to people who want to work in our industry, because I almost don't think they care about control, you know, how precise is the temperature, but I think they will care about whether the building is delivering safety and security for the occupants, and they will care about how that energy is being used from a sustainability standpoint. So I think we have to reinvent our vision of what we do to deliver on those goals.
Well said.
So we are at the top of the hour. So this is a perfect way to conclude. Mark, do you want to just say one last thing before we wrap up?
Just thanks, everybody. I mean, again, we are collectively in 7 months into this, and it does change and will probably continue to change. But what we talked about earlier is we're not now trying to figure out how to do it. We are doing it. So figuring this out. So
great.
That's it.
Wonderful. So thank you. Thanks, Mark, for leading this. And thanks everybody else for being here. And YouTube will be on tomorrow. You know the rest. See you next week on Monday Live. Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye.
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 Bye, everybody.